Hey, I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Mission Matters. My name is Adam Torres, and if you'd like to apply to be a guest on the show, just head on over to the website missionmatters.com and click on Be Our Guest to apply. Today I have Carter Wilcoxson on the line, and he is CEO and co-founder at Epic Services Company. Carter, welcome to the show.
Adam, thank you so much for having me back. I appreciate it.
All right. So for those of you who haven't seen our previous episode, I'm first off excited to have Carter back on the line. I know he's got some big milestones he's celebrated, and definitely to get into Epic Services Company there. I'm not going to spoil this, but they have some more things they're doing to help their clients, and that they're just really pushing the envelope. Every time Carter and I connect, my mind's always blown on what's happening at the company. So we'll get into all of that, but we'll start this episode like we start them all with our Mission Matters Minute. So Carter, we at Mission Matters amplify stories for entrepreneurs, executives, and experts. That's our mission. Carter, what mission matters to you?
Well, my why, right? That's why I was so attracted to being on Mission Matters originally the first time. And, now that we've expanded, we've had some milestones. The why is what I've recognized is trying to solve for two different areas. One is solving for advisors to win what I call the relationship war. And then two, their clients, helping them to solve a problem and delivering, education to them in order to eliminate the potential family fracturing that happens when you don't do the type of planning that we have incorporated in what we're going to be talking about today.
No, it's fantastic, and big fan of what you're doing over there at Epic, and just going a step further. So we'll go into how you're helping financial advisors specifically through Epic and what that looks like. But before we do that, how'd you get started in finance, and just how'd you get started on this path?
Yeah, thank you for asking me. So, it's interesting. I've been sort of like in the service industry most of my life, right? I remember I was telling this story over the weekend to one of my clients that, when I was 14 years old, I lied about my age and I got a job flipping burgers, right? Because I just wanted to make my own money. But, that brought me into, eventually I became, to fast forward, a national trainer for P.F. Chang's. And I really loved, the service and what that taught me in order to, to deliver on processes. And it was very regimented whenever I first started working for P.F. Chang's, great organization. And what ended up happening was I became a caddy at a private club where I met the guy who, and I was telling you, before we started the show, my mentor who brought me into the business almost 20 years ago. Wow. He was the very first person that it was my 50th birthday over the weekend. And he was the very first person to actually wish me happy birthday, even though we don't even work together. But I got into it with, just that heart for helping people. I just really, really love helping people. And it ended up bringing me, maybe it's just meant to be, but the golf world and the financial services world, they're really intertwined. And a lot of my advisors, I find that I work with, as we consider ourselves advisors to advisors, a lot of them play golf, right? So it's a great place to go out. You get to meet, you get to really find out about what a person's character is when you're out there for 4 hours on a golf course and what type of integrity. And you have to have integrity. Yeah. The thing that I love the most, and I know we'll talk about this in a little bit later on in the podcast about my podcast, but it's the theme. Like advisors that are in this industry, they love helping people, right? Yeah. That's just who I am. I have a heart for wanting to help people, but I wanted to be able to connect not only the advisor, but then ultimately their end user consumer and client acquisition. That is traditionally the challenge that they've faced, because I spent time in the field. I know what type of traditional challenges they have, and I wanted to meet those traditional challenges for them. So, it was really a progression from, being in the service industry that got me into another service industry in the financial services industry.
No, great story, and congrats on the big 5-0. So, it's just awesome. As we're talking and getting to know each other better, and introducing you to the audience, I just see this progression, and I've seen how your company's built, and now hitting that milestone. It's a big deal.
It's a huge deal, and every chance I get, I have to give a shout out to my wife, because whenever I was, we had dueling pianos. And it was a lot of fun, a lot of entertainment and everything. I played a song. I would go, after the song, when you give my speech, During that speech, the very first thing that I obviously did was I had to give acknowledgement to my wife, not only who helped put the entire party together, but also I said to the entire, all of my people, friends, family, colleagues that were celebrating with me, I said, she was the one that believed in me before I even believed in myself, right? I was called her diamond in the rough, right? So anyway, this is a part of the podcast that I'm ever on that I have to give a lot of congratulations to her and accolades to her, because without her, I definitely would not be where I'm at here today and getting a chance to talk more with you, Adam. And I got to tell you, one of the things that I love, and I think you've said this before, maybe the last time we were just speaking offline, you're like, man, where were you at whenever I was in the financial services?
Yeah.
So I don't know if you want to talk about that a little bit yourself. And I just, when you said that to me, I thought, man, I'm doing it the right way. When I can get a guy who's like, when I was really out there trying to grind it out, if I'd had someone like you, I know it could have been a different story maybe for yourself.
Yeah, I think that's a great segue, actually. So getting into this topic of what you talk about, so winning the relationship war. I mean, for those that are out there that have been, let's just say, doing business for a long time as a financial advisor, they know what that means. But there's different people, in their career. What does that mean to you, and why do you word it that way, like winning the relationship war?
Well, so this is 20 years of being in this space, recruiting independent financial advisors, that I recognize that, we are on the cusp of the greatest wealth transfer ever. 68 trillion with the
T
dollars, right? It's interesting. To understand how much a trillion is in the first place is unfathomable. And I've got a method that I teach people how to do this, but $1 million to $1 billion is nowhere close from $1 billion to $1 trillion. It's exponentially bigger. Anyway, $68 trillion industry. So what I recognize is that all of those same financial advisors who are vying for the same 10 to 11,000 baby boomers a day that are retiring for the next 15 years, they're all after the same 10 to 11,000 a day that are retiring, right? So I've really coined this phrase, and I've created this triumvirate of how do you win the relationship war? You do it by planning, right? That's what you have to do. If you hang your hat on products, pricing, and performance, you can always be outmatched or outdone, right? But if you have a process, right, that incorporates technology and the people, then now you can win that relationship war that opens up the opportunity to really do some real meaningful and impactful things for the households that you're after, right? The mass affluent market is so underserved. It's not even funny. So 500,000 to 5 million, that's really an underserved market. So this relationship war that I talk about encompasses this triumvirate where you have estate planning, and you see my sign right behind me where we've branded that. You have financial planning, and that's how you ultimately pass on your valuables. That's that $68 trillion that we're talking about. But then there's legacy planning, and that's what we're going to get into a little bit later on with legacy stories. Those three planning techniques, by tapping into our ecosystem, is what helps you win the relationship war, because you're all, listen up, advisors, if we're all out there, right? You're all competing. You have to ask yourself this question: what makes you different, right? So what I did, Adam, was I asked myself that question. If I'm going to be an advisor to advisors and bring them in and help them, allow them to keep their autonomy, right? They're not in this captive situation. It's an independent thing where we become an extension of their team. We have to ultimately help them to differentiate themselves. But then I ask myself, well, what am I going to bring to the table that differentiates me? So everything we've built over the last 5 years has been refining this proprietary process that really does help to win that relationship war.
So going a step further here, let's talk about, before we go deeper into the topic, I want to set the stage with maybe talking a little bit more about Epic Services Company. So tell us about the company.
Yeah. So, the last time I was on here, I talked about my other company, CSI Financial Group, and we had been so successful with that we wanted to expand that on a national reach. Even though we're a national company, the types of advisors we could work with at CSI Financial Group weren't, the ability to cast a wider net. Now with Epic Services that we've launched it, we have become the estate and legacy planning solution for advisors and their clients who have typically, in this area of expertise, in the subject matter, experts. We can now work with the Edward Joneses of the world or the Merrill Lynch of the world. And what we've discovered is they need to have a team of specialists that really prioritize estate and legacy planning. All too often, what we have learned along the way is they lose control of their clients. Like, think about this for a second, Adam. Advisors' clients will come to them and ask them, their trusted advisor, hey, Adam, or hey, Tom, like, where do I go to get all of my affairs in order, right? Where do I get this estate, work done? And they've been relegated for decades to have to be like, oh, well, I've got these 3 different attorneys that I have a quasi relationship with, right? So they send their clients away to go into this black box. And then what ends up happening for the advisor is they lose total, complete control, right? Yeah. So we wanted to address that by being the solution to collaboratively work and become an extension of those advisors' team. So now, in our attorney network and everything, they're now an extension of your team that you don't have to send them away. You're now the quarterback of this team that facilitates and implements and incorporates all the things that are necessary for your households that you're working with or you're trying to work with. And that is the secret sauce in order to win that relationship war. So that's what Epic was designed to do, was to become the advisors and the advisors' clients' solution to all things estate and legacy planning.
And so taking a step back there just for a moment, something that you mentioned stuck out. So the team approach. So you said that the advisor maybe loses control of the process just by referring out. So talk about like why that's important to maintain control throughout that process, and really just how advisors not only, win the war for, clients, but they just do better like by their clients. Like their clients, they're just more value to them, and they just have more valuable conversations and are able to plan better like further down the line.
Well, I want you to think about, and I'm going to give a bit of a spoiler alert here, and I'm going to inform all of the advisors out there the number one question or the issue that they have or the thing that they've brought back to me on that point. But it's the fact that they create the center of influence, right? They've like these 3 different attorneys or whatever. But I want to actually educate and enlighten all of those advisors out there that are wondering why all of these centers of influence with these attorneys to do this estate planning stuff, why is it always a one-way street? Why is it that I never get any type of reciprocation back? And let me go ahead and tell you why. And I've learned this because I've worked with all these attorneys. Yeah. Guess what? What I found out is that attorneys are actually taught to go out and try to get as many advisor relationships as possible for those advisors to send their clients to them. So if you think about it, integrity-wise, and I'm not trying to put any attorneys, on a pedestal for integrity, but if you think about it, if you have 50 advisors that are referring, hundreds of clients to you every single year, well, you can't really reciprocate because they all come from different advisors, right? Yeah. But I wanted to go ahead and enlighten all of the listeners here today that if they were ever wondering why it's a one-way street, that's the reason why right there. And I've learned this along the way. So anyway, I know that you want to talk about this multidisciplinary team approach. Yeah. The reason why it's so critically important is that why would you ever want to lose control of your client? Why would you not want all of this? So we become your actual in-house estate planning team with what we call the outsourced estate planning team. So now, as opposed to even chance losing control with your client, because you don't know what happens. I've even talked with advisors who have these great relationships, and you know what they're relegated to do is that they're just like, well, I don't want to lose control, so I sit in all these meetings. Yeah. I mean, it's not really beneficial for you to sit in on these meetings. And if you think about it, why do you do that? We're like, because I want to make sure I navigate the waters. I don't want my client hearing something that the attorney is going to say that doesn't even relate to the financial planning that we're going to do, right? Yeah. Why do that? So we just discovered that why don't we just create an ecosystem, an advisor-friendly ecosystem where we become an extension of your team and you maintain not only the autonomy, but you also look bigger than you are because now you have this team of specialists that surround you which if you're trying to win the relationship war, you want to look as big as possible, right? Because you're competing against all these other advisors. Well, now you become the quarterback, right? And you are the centerpiece of a team that surrounds you that has a vested interest in your success and also maintaining the ability to help out these households that you're bringing in to us. And it becomes an advisor-friendly situation that everybody wins in this scenario.
So let's get into process a little bit. So the 3 E's, like tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we just kind of sort of coined this phrase, if you will, delivering the 3 E's, where we educate, enlighten, and empower the advisor's clients to take action, right? The number one thing that we recognized and learned along the way is that the end user consumer, they procrastinate, not because they don't know that they need to do it. They procrastinate because they're not really sure where to go. And their expectation or hope is if they're working with a, quote unquote, trusted advisor, that when they go to that trusted advisor, they'll have a solution, right? So, what's really been rewarding for us is that by building this out over the last 5 years, with what happened in 2020, which was supposed to happen in 2030, all of these households, right? The ideal, households that advisors are looking to work with that are closer to their, decumulation phase, right? 68, 72, 75 years old who've gone through the accumulation phase. Now they're looking for a solution for what happens when I'm no longer here, right? What happens to my wealth when I'm no longer here? So we wanted to address all of that. But the thing that advisors need to understand is that we collaboratively work with them, and it becomes a point of a solution that is so rewarding that now you're leveraging not only your clients, but then you get introductions to other clients. I know I'm kind of sort of going off script here a little bit, but the thing is that we wanted to make sure that we were that solution at every step along the way. And Epic Services has been the number one reason why clients stop procrastinating. It's not that they don't need to get it done. They know they need to get it done. They just need to know where they can go. And if you're a trusted advisor that's part of our ecosystem, they're going to come to you and you're going to win that relationship war.
So Epic Services Company, I mean, we hear this all the time, like digital, companies need to go digital. I know that at the root of the company is a commitment to digital. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So, about 5 years ago, I found this underutilized software, right?
Yeah.
And, in software and technology, it's great. It's wonderful. It can really help, to facilitate a lot of things. But when it comes to this topic in this area, right, someone's lifelong savings and what's going to happen distribution wise when I'm no longer here and things of that nature and incapacity, it can almost feel like a behemoth, right? It can almost feel overwhelming to a lot of these households, right? So that's why going back to the educate, enlighten, and empower them, we deliver on the front end these educational tools that help to open the eyes up for these advisors, clients that, man, this is exactly what I was looking for, what I was hoping for. And they've really been accustomed and being forced to accept a lot of online things, a lot of digital stuff. But the platform itself, it doesn't really matter, right? It collects dust unless you have the right people and processes in place to incorporate that. And that's the sort of the secret sauce is leveraging the technology and embracing that digital transformational age, or the digital age really that we're in. We're never going backwards. It's never going to go back from this point going forward. This is just the way business will be done. So the advisors that are out there listening right now and everything need to understand that we've leveraged the technology, right? We've leveraged the software that enables us to win the relationship war, to onboard clients, to client acquisition that's traditionally a challenge. We've cracked the code and solved all of that by delivering these front-end educational pieces that help these households become empowered to get this work done. And they're blown away with what we call our 90 and 90 formula. It's a proprietary process where we can get 90% of their estate plan done in 90 minutes or less. That's the beauty of leveraging technology that we have. But the problem is, again, you need to at least introduce that to your clients. But we've solved on the back end by incorporating the people to do the process for these households. And that's why our advisors, we've absolutely changed their lives. I have advisors, Adam, that they went from making $125,000 a year to $800,000 a year.
Wow.
All because of incorporating this process. And that's not, that's a normal story that I have to tell. That's not like those one-off things. That is traditionally and typical that we have. In fact, I have advisors that they are so busy with this, they've stopped marketing altogether. They don't have to market any longer simply because these clients that they help out, there's like, oh my God, you got to help my sister or help my aunt or help my, and because we can work with clients all over the country, it doesn't matter if you're in St. Louis, Missouri or San Antonio, Texas or San Diego, California. You can help clients all over the country incorporating and implementing our entire ecosystem.
So tell me a little bit more about the feedback you've received, like from advisors. Of course, the couple of examples you just gave about an advisor, substantially increasing their income. I mean, that's a big deal. But like, what other kind of feedback have you received?
Well, and that's a great question. I'm glad you asked it. Let me answer it this way. I will actually go to my advisors and I'll have a conversation with them. And, a lot of times they're coming in and we're having meetings, like maybe on my podcast, I'll come in as a guest and everything. And I'll sort of tee up the question, like knowing what you know now, right? You've been in the business for 35 years, right, Scott, or you've been in the business 42 years, Rick. I'm just naming a couple names here that we work with, or Odwin or whoever, right? We're working with 75 to 125 at any given time that have fully embraced this entire platform. I'll ask them, knowing what you know now, when would you have started using the system? Right. And they're just like yesterday, right? It would have been like immediately if they'd have known now. And that's the part. Whenever I talk about our enlightened advisors, it's amazing to me. And I just had a conversation today with one of our prospective advisors that I said, we don't have to convince the advisor's clients on this. They're fully embracing it and understand. And their expectations like, well, of course we do everything online. Right? Like, what am I have to get in my car and drive somewhere? I mean, we don't do that ever. Everything's virtual, right? Anyway, so I have to convince and enlighten the advisor more often than I have to enlighten the advisor's clients. They're expecting something of this ease. So the feedback that I get from the advisors that we've brought onto what we call our advisor partner platform is thankfulness and willingness to share this with whoever. Now, of course, they are competitive, right? So they're like, I don't want to tell too many other advisors about this. I don't want anybody in my own backyard competing with me. But here's the thing. I just said it earlier in the show. 10 to 11,000 baby boomers a day for the next 15 years that are retiring. So there's plenty of them out there to go around that you can be able to tap into our system. And our goal and objective with Epic is to have an advisor who's like a top tier advisor who embraces everything that we're doing in every city in the United States to help the communities that they're serving.
No, that's powerful. I mean, the mission's powerful, and I know that you work directly with the advisors, but of course, thinking about the end user, which is their clients. I mean, it's really a win-win situation. Like everybody, like down the stream of who's using Epic services. I mean, it's a win. It's a winning proposition because the families. I mean, the legacy planning, everything that takes place that maybe needs to be done, but at times isn't being done or isn't being done maybe as effectively as it could be. I mean, it's a big deal, I think.
Well, cost effectiveness, efficiency, seamlessness, support. These are all things we addressed with this whole entire process. Because when you think about the traditional process to get this work done, and 83% of Americans have not done this. That's a World Council statistic, right, from 2016. I'm sure it hasn't changed much at all. We already knew that the underserved market was Middle America, right? Because most people, and we learned this along the way, most of these, the feedback that we get from those end user consumers is that when they heard estate planning, they heard estate taxes. And they're like, well, I only have $2.5 million. I don't have an estate tax problem, right? And it's a very, very small percentage that do have an estate tax problem. But what they do have a problem with is how does that 2.5 million effectively, tax efficiently get distributed to the next generation so that you can ensure that it's not squandered or wasted or whatever. And by the way, you don't have to be a spendthrift beneficiary to spend all the assets of 2.5 million. Here's a perfect example. if you are a successful doctor and your parents are super proud of you and you're making, your net worth is $30 million and mom and dad pass away, you're an only child, hypothetically, right? Or maybe you and a sibling, and you get outright distribution of $2.5 million. Now all of a sudden you're just like, oh, me and my wife, we got this extra wing. We've been talking about putting it on the house and everything. And now that we got mom and dad's, $1.75 million, now we can add that on. And guess what? That money's gone, right?
Yeah.
So we knew that what we call the grantor, right? The grantor's intent, these households that we're working with, they didn't necessarily want their money spent that way. If they did, they just giving it now, right? That's not what they want to do. They want to be able to leave a legacy. They want to be able to have their great grandchildren have something that they worked really, really hard to earn themselves. Because $2.5 million to someone who has $250 million, that's a drop in the bucket, right? You don't even think about that. But for those beneficiaries who receive that, even the ones who are super successful could not squander it, but they can justify why they might spend that a little bit faster, right? It's the whole lottery winning thing, right? And we have horror stories that happen from lottery winners. Their lives have been destroyed. That happens in our industry when outright distribution happens all the time. And the horror stories that I've heard and the family fracturing that occurs because of not having the proper distribution plan, which is really what estate planning is all about. And what we call family succession planning. So anyway, I hopefully that answers that question, a little bit more detail.
So Health and Wealth Podcast. So for those that watch this show often, they know I love supporting other podcasters. I mean, tell us about the podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much for asking about that. So the Health and Wealth Podcast was started, kind of incidentally, right? I was my wife, I'm going to go back to her again. About 2.5 years ago, I recognized that I didn't want to be my own best kept secret, which is why I was on your show the first time. I wanted to get my message out there, right? So I engaged the services of this company, and because they were going to book me to be a guest on podcasts all over and everything, and I was on a few podcasts early on and everything. But what ended up happening was, even though I was paying them a pretty good penny, I wasn't getting on the types of podcasts or the amount of them that I felt I deserved to be on. So I went back to them and I said, look, here's the deal. I'll be on any podcast. What I'm going to talk about can resonate with any type of listener. I just don't want to be my own best kept secret, especially with respect to the estate planning tool that maybe a lot of their listeners might be hearing about, right? So they end up reaching out, and I'll fast forward to my now co-host, Tim James, who had a health podcast called The Health Hero Show. Shout out to Tim James and The Health Hero Show. So he got onto my calendar and we had a 15-minute vetting conversation for him to find out, you're a financial guy. Why do you want to be on my podcast? Right? Like, that seemed weird to him. But what I found out was within, and my wife said, hey, why don't you start your own podcast? And then when I get into this 10 minutes into this 15-minute conversation, he said, man, Carter, you should start your own podcast. and here's the deal, Adam, you started yours, 5 years ago. It seems overwhelming. Like, where do I even start my own podcast? I had no clue where to start. So anyway, as I told him, so he told me he's got this podcast company and everything that works with him. If you're interested, let me know. So anyway, during that conversation, as I'm talking with him, an hour into this 15-minute vetting conversation, I'm learning more about him and his health journey and how he went out and organically healed himself. And I'm just like blown away with his story. It was unbelievable. Well, during this conversation, come to find out, he's a former wealth advisor turned a health advisor, right? So I'm just like, wow, this is amazing. So about an hour into it, I said, Tim, how about this? I said, why don't we start our own podcast and we'll call it the Health and Wealth Podcast Show, right? So he was like, man, Carter, I really wanted to do that whenever I was a wealth advisor. I just never got around to it and everything. So fast forward, that was 18 months ago or whatever it was. And we just launched episode 41. We launch every week. We've had, a lot of guests that have come on, financial advisors come onto the show. Costs them nothing to get on there, right? We give them a platform to talk about, their why and their journey to, kind of like what we do here, right? But there's no cost. Come on, expand upon, your reach and what your ideal client looks like. And then there's 3 segments. The third segment is probably my favorite, right? It's where we flip the script and all of our guests who again have been CFPs, trust officers, attorneys,
Yeah.
you name it, other health advisors. They come on and they ask my co-host, Tim James, who's a wealth, no pun intended, of knowledge, all things health. They ask him any, health questions under the sun. And every single time I learn something new. It's unbelievable on all the things that I learned. But, it was meant to be conversational, it's long form, much like this and everything. It's about an hour long. And, they come on and we release and launch every Wednesday at 1:30 Pacific time. Obviously, you can be able to go to our website for all of our previous, guests and hosts and everything, www.thehealthandwealthpodcastshow.com. And but the podcast has been warmly received. It's a great opportunity for me to get to meet interesting people. And that's what I was saying earlier on in this interview, is that it's the normal theme. The advisors that come onto the show, that take advantage of coming onto the show to expand upon, their demographic and their ideal clients and everything, they all have one thing in common. They have a heart for helping people. They love helping people. And those are the ones that I want to align myself with as well.
Man, wonderful story. And we'll put the links to the podcast and all that good stuff in the show notes so that my audience can just head on right over and check it out. But I just have to say, Carter, so I mean, lots going on here. Companies growing, hit the big 50. Podcast is raring and roaring. I mean, you're knocking out of the park with the podcast and got a lot of episodes out there. So what's next? I mean, what's next for you? What's next for Epic Services Company? Like, what's next?
Yeah, that's such a great question. So phase one, if you will, even though you just got through saying a whole bunch of things, just real quick about the podcast. One last thing. What I love about it is that, and this is a good segue into what's next, is that it's a nice breakup for me, for my normal day-to-day, all these things that I've got, all my fingers and all these different pots and everything, and building and scaling up and all that good fun stuff. It's actually a nice little break for me to just do the podcast and just have a conversation. So what's next for Epic Services? Phase one, we launched 4 months ago, where we're the estate and legacy planning solution for all things for advisors and their clients. And then what we are doing, and we've already created the team behind us. They've already bought in fully into my vision on what we're trying to accomplish. And that is to become a trust company in Nevada, which our corporate headquarters is in Incline Village, Nevada, as we Epic Services Company will be applying to the Nevada Financial Institutions Division to get its trust powers to bring trust services to the advisor network, insurance advisor, financial advisor, wealth advisor, anybody who works in that area, realtors, CPAs. We'll be able to work with anybody at that point and offer trust services, to the masses of people. So we have the team. And that's the secret, right? It's one thing to be like, oh, hey, it's great, you're going to start a trust company. But in order to be authorized to start a trust company, there's a lot of things that go into it. And it's been 18 months in the making.
Wow.
4 months ago, we launched phase one with the Epic Services Company for what we were talking about earlier and everything. Phase two, as we're in capital raise mode, I think maybe we're going to talk about that in a little bit, but we're raising capital right now through a lot of my relationships that I have and everything. And in order to be able to bring this to the masses, and these early adopters are going to be big winners when it comes to this capital raise. Again, it's a $68 trillion industry we're talking about for the next generation. Well, Epic Services, by applying to get its trust powers, will enable us to not only create this client acquisition model, but enhance it with client retention and operational control for the advisors that work with us, with an advisor-friendly trust company.
Wow, that's a big deal. So that just really you're already doing great work for your advisors, but now by adding that trust company function to it, that just takes you to the next level, right?
There's really not, honestly, this is 5 years of educating myself. I feel like I've gone to law school for the last 5 years, by the way. So learning all the different regulations and learning the difference between, a trust company and a broker dealer and an RIA and all of those things and what they fall under. Is it FINRA? Is it SEC? Is it OCC? All these things. Well, when I learned about the capabilities of what you could bring to the mass affluent that we talk about, right? That 500,000 to 5 million marketplace. And some of my advisors themselves who have invested into Epic Services with that anticipation of becoming the trust company, they're just like, well, you're going to compete with the Northern Trust of the world, right? But Northern Trust, they won't even talk to you unless you're worth $10 million.
For sure.
Right? Now, you're going to be able to bring world-class wealth management and trustee services to the masses of people who need and deserve this type of stuff, and they don't have access to it. We're going to make access like never before. So, it'll be an absolute game changer. And I don't want to sound too braggadocious about this or bloviate or, make it sound greater than it is. But I'm telling you right now, I wouldn't have even gone down this road if I were not able to connect the dots. Why an advisor? They will change their entire practice, and it'll make their succession planning even that much more powerful by connecting with our entire ecosystem.
I totally get it. And you mentioned capital raise. So what type of strategic investors are you looking for?
Yeah, so I've been talking to to venture capital, which, by the way, I was just going to go out to those I'm closely connected to that have access to capital. Right, they're looking for some of these. It's a $50,000 minimum to be able to come in. Right, so I can identify a lot of people who are accredited investors that I'm already connected to. Right, so and it's not a huge capital raise. That's the thing about it. I believe it might be maybe. I've been telling people it's like being on the ground floor of Apple, right? Or Microsoft or something like that. But it takes a lot of time to understand how all these things, intertwine and how they're interconnected. And, people ask me, they're like, well, what's the competition or who else is doing this? And I'm just like, it's hard to point to anything because nothing like this really exists. Right. So it's kind of like you've got this one house that's at the top of the hill. And, and you're in this zip code and you want to sell the house. But it's so big, it's so enormous, the comps don't line up, right? If you're a realtor, you know what I'm talking about, right? So how do you determine on what the value of this is, right? If it doesn't really exist. So anyway, once I enlighten these investors to answer your question, they have the ability to get in on the ground floor, early stage investors. They will be very happy that they did. So to answer your question, I wasn't really going to go to venture capital, but what we've decided to do is that we've been leveraging a technology that we're ultimately going to go to venture capital to really enhance this technology. So in order to do that, it may be a bigger ask for more capital. So that's where we're really going in some of these PE companies and things of that nature. But it's such a small capital raise with relation to how big it can get. Industry that we've just been bootstrapping the whole thing along the way.
This is awesome. Well, Carter, first off, it's been great having you back on the show and just seeing the progress at Epic Services Company and just like what you're doing. I mean, it's just amazing. Hitting the big 5-0, got the podcast going, lots of things happening. If somebody wants to connect and to follow up and to learn more, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, so you can be able to, and I'm sure in the show notes you'll put in epicservicescompany.com's website and everything, and the way to connect, directly to us. I have a calendar link that I'll also provide, so they can just get on my calendar if they want to just block off 15 minutes just to learn a little bit more. Right. One of the things that we are literally launching today is the ability for advisors to not only own what we call the estate plan portfolio, but at a very deep discount for them, because we've recognized that the successful advisors, when they go through the process themselves, it gives them a lot more clarity and understanding about how the whole system works and how we work with their clientele. But it's that old saying, the cobbler's kids have no shoes. Advisors they haven't done this either, right? So we wanted to make it available to them, but give them a deeper discount to incentivize them, but also enable them to understand exactly how the whole system works. So, go into our website, epicservicescompany.com. And then of course my calendar link, block off 15 minutes with me, learn a little bit more about what it is that we're doing and bring it to market and what we've already successfully done and refined. I think that it'll be the best 15 minutes of your life, or worst case scenario, the last 15 minutes you ever have to spend with us.
That's awesome. And yes, we will put all those links in the show notes, of course, and just make sure everybody can just head right on over. And speaking of the audience, if this is your first time with Mission Matters, we're all about bringing on entrepreneurs, executives, and experts and having them share their mission, like why they do what they do, like what gets them fired up to go out there and make a difference in the world. If that's the type of content that you're interested in, definitely hit that subscribe button, because we have many more mission-based individuals coming up, and we don't want you to miss a thing. And Carter, really, it's been a pleasure reconnecting. And man, I'm just excited to continue to watch the growth and just see where you take this thing next.
Yeah, well, I'm so thankful that you had me on again and everything. And I have one last thing that I just want to share with your audience, if that's okay.
Go for it.
And I really want to talk about more specifically about legacy stories. I had a conversation just this morning with a CFP on the East Coast, and she's looking at bringing this not only to her but to her entire firm for the estate and legacy planning solution. She told me that when she was at Vanguard, what we do with the legacy stories is something that they did for their ultra high net worth, but they had to be a minimum of $50 million. She just told me that this morning as I was talking with her about what it is that we're doing with not only the estate plan, but additionally with legacy stories. Legacy stories is how you pass on your values. When I explained to her more specifically about why we're bringing that emotional piece to the table to have one area, because here's the sad part about it. When we pass away, Adam, everything in your head and in your heart dies with you. And if you've not documented that somewhere, it's lost and gone forever. Legacy stories is that piece that we bring to the table, that when she told me that when she was at Vanguard, that $50 million minimum to even have access to something like that they did, I was like, we're on the right track. So anyway, thank you so much for having me on Mission Matters. I love what you guys are doing over there, which is why I wanted to be on again. And a shout out to you and your professionalism, and anybody. I will tell you right now, if you want to get your mission out and it matters, you want to be on here. And you didn't ask me to say that. I did that, unsolicited. You want to be on with Adam Torres so that you can share your story.
Awesome. And thanks again, Carter, for coming on. And until the next time, thanks again.
Absolutely. Thank you, Adam.